Hey, Victoria, I saw that you just jumped on. Do you?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Do you want to do any sort of introduction? I guess we didn't touch base on that. So.
No, I'm really going to let you take it away.
Okay, cool. Well, first of all, what time is it? It's a little bit after 10, so why don't we go ahead and get started. I'm recording this so that we'll also have the ability to, folks that might want to see it can come back around and look at it. So first, I just want to thank Victoria and HSA for having the continued conversation on data and really supporting this whole data initiative. I think it's so critical, so important for the things that we're doing. So, I guess out of the last conversation, of the last data huddle, or not data huddle, but conference call, there was some interest in taking a look at some of the things that we built out for Catholic Charities Westside Head Start here in Arizona. So what we wanted to kind of do was go through the possibilities and the practicalities of data dashboards. So we'll give you a brief overview of the things that we've built, and then we'll go very quickly through the practicalities of it, and I'll show you how we've done it on a very, very small scale. But it'll give you an idea, it'll give you a hint of what you can do and how easy it is. And I know that's coming from a data person, so if you have any questions during that conversation, just please let me know. So I've also invited Larry Campbell to chat a little bit about some of the things that we're doing, some of the things that we've been able to do at Head Start, Westside Head Start here in Phoenix, and they just went through their Focus Area 2 review, and I wanted to see if he could also give a little bit of information on how that went with the data dashboards that he was using. Larry had to hop on another call. I don't know, Larry, are you on right now?
Yeah, I'm on, Dave.
Okay. So we'll go through some of the just general overview of the dashboards that we're looking at, and then Larry will talk a little bit more about the actual how he's been using them, and then we'll go from there. So what we'll cover today, again, the possibilities, real life dashboard examples, realities of implementation, some of the challenges, some of the barriers that you have to overcome. And Larry's going to talk about using the dashboards, and then give a little bit of review on his, or a little bit of summary on his Impact of Focus Area 2 review, which they just had a couple of weeks ago. And then we'll talk about the practicalities, the actual ETL process. You'll hear me use that term over and over again. ETL means extraction, transformation, and loading. So it's the process of taking the data and putting it into your data model. Then we'll talk about the data file. We'll be working with a data file today, but I'll also give you a little bit of an idea of what a data warehouse is and how we use it here, and how I use it to build any of the visualizations that I have. Then we'll talk about the visualizations. And I use Power BI. I know other folks use Tableau. I think Tableau is great software. I just use Power BI because everything else that I use it's a very seamless integration. So I love Power BI. I also kind of like the look of it, the feel of it. So, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we distribute that data. So does that sound good to everybody? Is that, I know it's a lot to cram into an hour and a half, but we're going to try our best, and we'll have a Q&A at the end, but please feel free to jump in with any questions that you have along the way. Larry, do you want to say anything before we go into it?
No, just again, thanks for letting Dave and I do this. And yeah, in a couple of slides, I'll just walk through how this has impacted our program and what we're doing with it.
All right. So again, we thought we'd start by giving you all an overview of the actual live dashboards that have been implemented at Westside Head Start here in Phoenix. So we've done more than this, but we really wanted to go over the 4 major dashboards that Larry uses: the director's report, the class report, the child progress report, and the family services report. Now, each of these actually have several pages associated with it, but these are really the overall report modules that he uses. So I also want to say that all of these reports have been created using standard live reports built in ChildPlus. So the data is extracted and uploaded into a standard data warehouse where all of these reports sit. And we'll talk a little bit about that data warehouse in a little bit. But it was, it's a very, as you'll see, it's a very structured, streamlined process. It's not overly complicated. But if you have questions along the way, please let us know. So this is the data portal. I'm going to switch over now to the actual data portal for Head Start. So this is the live. Can you all see the screen?
Yeah, it looks good, Dave.
Okay. So this is the actual Head Start analytics portal for Westside Head Start. So all of their reports are published through this portal. We've decided to use this portal because it's much more user-friendly rather than publishing through Power BI service and having people go in. It's also much more cost-effective because we can publish through a SharePoint, and you don't have to purchase a user license to actually view the report. So go to the director's report real quick. So this is the first report that we built out. Now this is an overall report, again, pulling data from ChildPlus that gives Larry and his team, and they review this on a weekly basis, or I'm sorry, as a team, they review it on a monthly basis. But it really just gives general information about the first page is enrollment, then they look at attendance, and then there's health services, family support, meals and nutrition, and then also a report on in-kind. So we'll just real quick take a look at some of those. What I wanted to really give you the opportunity to see is how dynamic these reports are. So as we can look at 2018, and it'll show us the 2018 school year. We can select the periods in that school year that we want to look at. If we select, let's go to 2019. If we select a specific classroom, it'll tell us, all the data will change. Again, it's very dynamic. It'll tell us the top 5 reasons for termination. It'll tell us the current dropped and completed that are in there. So it's very dynamic. On the attendance, again, very similar. A lot of the same information that you'll get. It's all dynamic. We're looking at the overall attendance as well as the individual classroom attendance. We can, if we want to, we can drill into each specific class, and it'll tell us the attendance of each individual child. And then we can actually go into it again and look at which days the children were actually, the days they were actually absent. It'll also...
Dave, this is Larry. I just wanted to maybe point out, so those numbers that they're seeing there as you're hovering over them, that's the ChildPlus ID number, correct?
Yeah. Yep, that's the ChildPlus.
There's no names associated with this, but
yeah, correct. What we wanted to do is we want to make the data on here very transparent to the organization, to staff, because when data is transparent, it is you give a little bit more buy-in from staff. But in order to do that, we want to protect, we want to make this anonymous. So if there's ever any question, the staff they can always take this ChildPlus ID and go back and refer to the ChildPlus instance and get who that is. Again, we can select on each individual class. Oops, let me take that out. And it'll tell us the reasons for absence, and it'll tell us how they compare to the average. So the lighter area is the average of the entire program, and then this is the average for the specific classroom. We can drill down into the absence codes and the reasons. This just gives us an overview of the immunizations and health services. Again, drill down capabilities, we can actually go in and see which children have a past due, and then we can actually see which ones are past due. Now this is again, very dynamic. It takes a little bit of time for staff to get used to it, and I think Larry, when he discusses it, he'll give you a little bit of background of how it really is. You have to get the staff engaged on it. Meals and nutrition is just pretty general. Family support. We actually rebuilt this with a specific family services report that we'll take a look at. And then the in-kind, we really wanted to build so that Larry wanted to challenge his staff on who can be more effective at engaging the parents. If we look at each one of these, we can actually look at parent involvement, and then we can see the children whose parents are highly involved and which aren't, and we can try to then focus on those individuals to maybe create some program enhancements or some programs to get those parents more engaged. But
hey, David.
Can tell you. Yeah, go ahead.
This is a quick question. When you did the in-kind report, how did you structure the not factor for parents that were not? Because ChildPlus seems to be a little hard to be able to mine for in-kind to get the data. So you have parents that do a little bit or a lot, but then you also want to capture the parents that are not doing any in-kind at all. How do you account for that?
That's a good question. And I don't think we've actually built that in at this point, but I think we can. I mean, the data that I'm pulling out is a flat file live report that's dropped out. So I can pull each individual data field that I want, and I can filter it by those data fields. So if I know which data field I'm looking for, I can filter it. And maybe I can show that to you when we get into the practicalities of it, how those data fields can be, how we can create those filters to pull that data out. You can also, if you pull that data down and you've captured that in a data field, within the Power BI model itself, you can use a filter to extract that data, or to create a visualization that extracts that data.
Okay, so all these dashboards, are they built off of Flat files?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Flat files are extracted and then uploaded into a data warehouse. The reason we do that, and there might be, I don't know if there's ChildPlus folks on here. It's for at least for me, there's a lot of smaller organizations, smaller grantees that aren't going to be able to afford the direct, the DAA service. And unless you've mapped out the schema of the ChildPlus backend tables, which can be complicated in and of itself. I think we've chatted about that at data huddles in the past. I think there's some folks that have been able to do that, but for many organizations, it's much easier if you just write a live report in the system and they can just generate it out. They're more used to that. Again, the idea is that we're trying to create something that is much more, can be maintained long-term, more on the side of staff and grantee.
I'm sorry, David, there was a moment where there was a cutout there. I don't know if it's my phone or if everybody else is having the same issue. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So I was just saying that it's what I'm trying to do is build something that is easily maintained by current staff at a grantee, but either by what you don't want to have to go out and purchase or hire a high-end database administrator to do a lot of this. So let's see. So that's income. So that's one of the first reports. The next report we ran. Any comments, Larry? Any thoughts?
Well, just to say, this is the dashboard that I use to report to Policy Council and the Board of Directors, because primarily most of this information is what's required in the Act to report. So this has made it just very, very nice to have this for them. They can actually see data, and at board meetings, I can walk them through, some key points that I think is important for them to know.
Thanks, Larry. And then we'll also show you in a little bit on the practicality side how you can actually, with Power BI, create a PowerPoint presentation from these slides. It's a static document, but it's something that like Larry uses to distribute to his policy council. The next report we built was the class report. And this really just goes into each individual classroom, or using the class assessments gives an indication over time how individual classrooms, how individual teachers are doing. So this is comparing against 2017 national average. We just got 2018, so I haven't been able to input that yet. It gives you a quick heat map of the areas that are of concern. Larry and his group do a RISE and a non-RISE, so they want to compare how their RISE classrooms are doing against non-RISE. And that's, Larry, could you just briefly explain what RISE is?
Yeah, that's a Regio classroom. So we have a pilot project going on. This is the third year with a couple of other partners here in town. So it's been really good. So we're just trying to find out if a Regio-inspired classroom gets any higher outcomes than other classrooms. So,
right. Then we can look at class scores by teacher and really start focusing in on which teachers we need to do some more intensive coaching around. Then there's a schedule of the professional development teacher training, and we can actually look at each individual teacher, which ones, and then
go into, Dave, go into Shannon Hatchett.
Okay. Whoops.
She'll have more information. A little bit further down, a little bit further, right there.
So we can look at individual teachers and then drill down into which type of training they've had. Now, this is an area that Larry and his team have identified they want to start collecting additional data on. So they're working right now to figure out a process on the front end of ChildPlus of how to segregate that data or how to identify that data going in. They want to see which is professional and which is more just general organizational training. And finally, this actually was just a tool that we used to look at observer fidelity as the individuals were making observations. We wanted to ensure that they were having what would be, a statistically viable variance in the observations that we were making. Now, because the observations are not that low, you're not looking at the tremendous amount of data that you could do a rigorous statistical analysis on. What it was giving us, though, was an idea of, for example, the first observer, in the 52 observations they made, their minimum score was 5.8 max. To us, that seemed like it was still too narrow of a corridor for those observations. So it's an area that the coaches, or not the coaches, but the FSF, Larry, I'm sorry, who were the ones that do these observations?
Yeah, those are instructional coaches up there. And then if you look down to the third one, it says ASCC. So what we did on this too is we were interested and curious to see if outside observers, how those would correlate to our internal staff, kind of under the hunch or hypotheses that we would have internal bias. And that is pretty much what we saw. So this year we contracted out to do all of our class assessments. And again, part of the reason was that it would take our 3 coaches and the size of a program that we have, it might take them a month or 5 weeks just to get all the class done. So we felt we were losing, really valuable coaching time. So for 2 reasons, we did that, and we have found, and Dave, you can show them there, that the margin between our outside consultants, or the greater depth, did show at this first point that there was some internal bias there. If you look up at the Martinez S, which is the first one you looked at, Dave, and I think that was the one we always talked about that was the smallest variance. So it's just been kind of good to see this. Now, a lot you got to take into consideration too how many how many class they did, because the larger number is going to skew your percentages. But it's been interesting to see when staff know each other for many years, how their internal bias may show up. And not intentionally, but just the fact that it's just a natural thing. And they know staff and are working with them.
Right. We'll want to keep up real quick. So we'll move on to the child progress report. So this is built on TSG, TSG data that Larry and his group are use Teaching Strategies Gold. We're not going to look at spring because that's still too early. But what we can do is look at past checkpoints that have been finalized. It'll actually tell us where each, an overall summary of the program. We can also take a look by site, by classroom. It'll tell us the child's, how they're scoring, and then it'll also tell us if they're meeting, they meet, are they above or they're below. And these are all based on the TSG color bands. So if we were to look at the individual domains, it'll tell you for this child what that color band should be. So it helps to really identify some of the areas that that need to be addressed with specific children. And then it actually goes into the individual
and have some background noise. Would you mind just quickly muting yourself? We've had a few of those so far.
Yeah,
Sorry to
thanks. Thanks, Victoria. So it goes into the individual domains and then looks at the individual dimensions of those.
Hey, Dave, where are the Eckers and Itters? Is it on this tab or different?
No, it's a different one. So
Okay.
if we pulled up the Eckers.
There we go. So
Go ahead, Larry.
what our team has been doing a lot this year, so they've been looking at the Eckers as compared to the class scores, as compared to the child outcomes in TSG. So it's been kind of interesting because they're looking at 3 different data sets and trying to make correlations. You know, if a classroom was really low and their Eckers and their environments, how might that be impacting their class scores and classroom organization, things like that. So it's been really nice for the education team to see all these different data sets and begin to start, you know, looking at potential correlations.
Yeah.
David, this is Icy. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Acres and Eaters, as you know, ChildPlus doesn't track that. Are you using any platform or Excel so that for you to do the coloration?
You know, that's a very good question. What Larry and his team have done is actually they've built out a. Is that for Eckers? Did they? No, that was for Triple P.
Yeah.
What they built out are apps on using Power Apps, Microsoft Power Apps, where the data can be input on an iPhone or an iPad by an observer, and it goes automatically into the data warehouse. So when you build out that Power App, the data file or the data repository actually sits out on the data warehouse. This was one that they had built or they had done prior to actually building out the app. So this one is just an Excel spreadsheet, except we've uploaded into a SharePoint list, and then the data is pulled off of the SharePoint list. And if for those that don't know, SharePoint lists are essentially SharePoint Excel spreadsheets.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then so let's look at that's the child progress. So the family services report is the last one we just kind of want to take a look at. Let's see. So this is a family outcomes heat map, which is really looking at both family service events and family service actions, and it is telling us what the percentages of anything that's yellow or anything that's red has a crisis identification in it. And Larry, you might want to just chat briefly about how the family service assessment is done, or how it's our own internal document.
Sure. Well, if you look over in the far right-hand column there, you'll see all of those are parent, family, community engagement type goals, as well as our particular assessment we use. So you can just see and correlate all those. For example, CC2 over there, it's about the third one down, community connections. How satisfied are you with the resources that are available? So for each of the needs assessment type questions that we're asking, we can get a summary of how they've answered and what their needs assessments are. And again, as Dave said, with the heat map, knowing where are some crisis situations that absolutely should be targeted right away.
Yeah, and we can filter it we just want to see the individual classrooms that have families that have identified that they have a crisis. So these are families that have at least one crisis observation.
So hold on, Dave, real quick. So, that's okay. Yeah, hover over there. Let's see, on F12, You see that crisis situation, no, to your left, over to your left, the red, a little bit more.
Oh, right there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So then if you look over to the right, at the very bottom, it says F12, finances. I am able to pay my bills on time and my family is financially stable. So that would mean, again, a family services worker could go in there immediately and see some targeted topics to begin building family partnership agreements around, referrals, etc.
And then we were looking at the actual FSSs. They wanted to have a place where they could go to actually look at. I'm not going to get in too much of this detail because there is some information that's specific to each individual child. But what this allows them to do is drill into specific families and specific events or actions for each family from a certain period of time for a year. For each school year, and it really, what it does is it brings together 7 or 8 different ChildPlus reports that they were having to print out and look at before into a really easily accessible, easy to use report that they can interact with. So that is, we just wanted to give you a quick review of the things that are possible with Power BI and with your existing ChildPlus systems, or even, again, these are built on ChildPlus, but with your existing systems. And Larry's going to talk a little bit about the challenges and some of the things that he faced, and then we'll get in and I'll actually show you how just to do a basic attendance dashboard in Power BI using data that I'm pulled directly from ChildPlus.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, before you get out of this, can you go down and just show them the communication tabs down at the bottom, how staff can interact with one another?
Yeah, this is one of the things that we like. So we could say, looked at the FSA completion rate. Good job. So it's posted out there, and also, so this provides really a documentation log of your staff actually using the dashboard, and it creates an opportunity for management to engage with the staff on specifics. You can also then share that that document with a specific staff member. Now, it's important that those staff, they'll have to have access to this. They won't be able to access this this report. So you can't just send this to anybody outside the organization. They'll have to actually have access to this portal.
Yep. Good. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so let's go back. And,
David?
Yeah.
This a quick question. So when you were saying that you were loading these onto in your SharePoint, but not having to give license to how is that? How are you doing? Because what I understand is if you embed into SharePoint, you still have to
have a license.
Because when I understand when you publish a PowerPoint, whether it's in SharePoint on a web base, you still have to have a license to view it unless you have an enterprise license, which is very costly.
Right. So each person has the free Power BI license, but they don't have to download it. They don't. You know what? During the practicality side of it, I'll show you how it's done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Larry, are you ready to take over?
Yep, absolutely. So when we first began getting these dashboards, our staff, what I want to talk about is actually really how you take these dashboards and really make them come alive for your staff. So as you can see, they're pretty robust, and we just showed you a little teeny bit. When you begin to drill down into some of these reports, it's pretty telling. So kind of a little joke here, but it's like when our staff first saw that, it was like they're looking at a Maserati, and everybody was just flabbergasted. Beautiful car, beautiful dashboard, but don't touch. So look, but don't touch. So for 2 to 3 months, it was just kind of people staring at it, looking at it, appreciating, you know, what they're seeing, but really not feeling confident at all to go in and begin to use it. So it became very evident to me at this point that I had to create a culture of really analyzing data and not being afraid to get in there and use it. So it's been a process. So if you go to the next slide, Dave, what I began to do is slowly begin to integrate this. So as we looked at them for a while, then I began.
Sorry. Oops.
Oh yeah, you were in ChildPlus now. Okay. So I started. We do have monthly leadership meetings with management and all key stakeholders, and it's a 3-hour meeting, but it's a very interactive meeting, and we'll get together for about 30 minutes, talk about some stuff, begin looking a little bit at the dashboards, but then we break up into small groups all around the office, and they'll all take about 90 minutes and really start drilling down into this data. So they bring their laptops, they bring performance standards, they bring all these things. And then we come back and begin to report out. So in the beginning, I started, as they were looking at these dashboards, somewhat shell-shocked. I began to just kind of introduce the fact of, I wonder, you know. So I would say things, oh gosh, look at this data. I wonder if it could be because of this. Or I wonder if it has anything to do with this. So I just wanted to start throwing out that it's okay. All data does is bring up more and more questions. And so by just kind of using that language and planting the seed, they did begin to see, oh, if I really get into this, this could tell me some good information. So it was kind of just creating that environment. So every meeting then thereafter, I began to, like 1 month, I sent an email about a week before, and I said, okay, the dashboards are going to be published with updated information on Tuesday. Our leadership team meeting is the following Tuesday, so here's what I'd like you to do. So I gave them some exercises that would force them to get into the dashboards, and then I had them come to our meeting and report out. We had the dashboards up. I had them look and point us all to the data that they looked at, how they drilled down, how they got to whatever hypothesis that they thought was going on. And it just, that began to get the ball rolling, that they weren't fearful of getting in and start using it. And then that whole idea of I wonder began to take on. There's also a situation in the beginning where you begin to look, in the years I've been in Head Start, and data that we've used to present in the past, which might have just been Excel pie charts or graph bars, there was always this feeling a little bit of, oh, that data's not right. That can't be right. So there was some education that, you know, I needed to do with them as well and say, that's fine. That's part of what data is. If you don't think that's right, go back and figure out what could be going on. If you know X amount of FPAs have been done and this isn't reflecting it, figure out what it is. So trying to help them appreciate, even with these dashboards or whatever data you have, if there are data entry errors, you're going to get poor data out. So it caused them to go in and say, oh, on referrals, they forgot to click the box in ChildPlus that said that they received the service. So it's showing that we gave a referral, but nobody got the service. So it helped them begin to get their mindset around that as well, that this is a quality assurance measure in and of itself, that again, before you get to the end of the year and start trying to do your PIR data, and you see that all this information is skewed, and at the end of the year, staff are having to go back and research. So that began to become enticing to them. So then, in the beginning, they looked primarily just at the large overarching aggregate data. So then I realized, okay, I got to get them drilling down into this. So I began to give more specific examples of what they needed to do. So for example, at our last month's meeting, I talked to the the family support services staff. And I said, for example, okay, go in and come back and report out your top 5 classrooms with the highest turnover rate and your 5 that have the lowest turnover rate. And now drill down into some of those classrooms and begin to figure out, give an accounting for why you think the turnover was so high in that classroom. I told them, for example, to go in, home base, for example, go in and look at home base attendance. How many meetings or appointments have been canceled? Told the education staff, go in and report out, for example, on the number of lesson plans that are being turned in.
We're going to be presenting the same items and the same concepts, except we're going to reuse it with live data from ChildPlus using DAA as our backbone, and that
the dashboards were created.
Okay. Not sure if that was a question or just a comment, or somebody just wasn't on mute, but anyway, so we began to drill down. I would ask the education team then, how many observations should they have at this point in the checkpoint series? How many do they have? Go in and look at some of those observations. Are they quality, really matched up with the objective or learning outcome that they tied that to and rated it? So I was just basically trying to get them enticed to drill down further and begin to look and try and come up with reasons why. So it's been good. And again, this is all a process. We just started using this in early fall, and Dave is continuing to build out dashboards. So we're really in the infant stages of still using this. But the key is to begin giving assignments. And when we did that, it really began to get exciting. So we wanted to tie this all together with coordinated approaches. And if you'll see here, we're going to show a couple little clips here, that management systems wheel from Office of Head Start. As we broke up into the groups and had them start looking at data, I wanted to begin for them to see the interdependencies in different areas, that if you begin to tweak a system, where else is it going to affect, or who else needs to be involved in this? When we began to do this, this was the turning point that they just really began to adopt a love for this data, begin to be curious about it without being defensive about it. And I think something about these dashboards too is that in the past, when I published data in other ways, it's always been like a particular area or a supervisor or manager and their direct reports under there. And while this is still there and you can see this, the way it's presented is just, it's less threatening. So nobody is like embarrassed, oh, don't show my classroom data. It really talked about more what's happening in the program. So Dave, yeah, why don't you go ahead and let's show these few clips so that you can see kind of how the team has begun to adopt those and also to begin talking with one another.
For this program, it's 27 minutes. So,
you guys received the Eckers scoring that we received.
I'm not hearing much volume, Dave. I'm not sure.
We have ITERs, that's for infants and toddlers, and then we have class.
There we go.
Then we also have our monitoring tools that we have that the PQSs are doing. So I want us to not so much get bogged down about this actual tool, but the fact that we have all of these assessment tools and how all of us play a part in those and making sure that the classrooms are successful in them. This one will show. What I'd rather you do is look at, it talks about their strengths, but if you turn the page, Martine, it'll notice a weakness, the very first weakness. I mean, this is the word, areas of improvement. So it looks like they need furniture, it looks like they've got central Looks like some of the displays on the wall are not correct.
So there you can see, you get the next one set up, Dave. Oh yeah, the volume might be good if you can bump that up. So here,
We were doing this in ChildPlus because we knew that we had kids, 2 years to 10 months old, but we still.
And they were not,
Yeah.
So it's more of a.
Yeah, I would think.
hey, Dave, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Could you bump it back? It could just be the buffering that, if you bump it back a little bit, see if it begins to play without that static.
Well, hey, Larry, real quick, can we let's move forward a little bit because we're kind of pressed on time now. If we're going to do some of the other things, so
Well, the last one you're going to show, can you do that after it plays for about 10 seconds? Bump it back.
Sure.
And
So it's kind of getting out of the blinders and really opening it up to.
that's why.
Are you seeing it?
Yeah. So now bump it back to the beginning.
So it's kind of getting out of the blinders and really opening it up to.
That's why we developed service delivery team, because service delivery team, now in this instance, service delivery team was our solution. Now you can take the solution or the team that we developed and say, is it effectively, as we outlined it on that graph, is it meeting, how are all of these pieces interconnected with service delivery team, and is there issues around it?
All right. I can still be heard, right, Dave?
Yep.
Okay, so you can see here, even though the volume wasn't perfect, the idea is that you can see how people are breaking up, beginning to talk. These are all cross-discipline. We have monitors here. We have instructional coaches, area managers, administrators. Everybody is all there together. So it began to help people understand the interdependencies. So the one last thing I wanted to say is, well, two things. So the focus area review we had 2 weeks ago. We started the week on Monday morning with a data tour, as is talked about a lot in the focus area. And we spent about 45 minutes walking them through some of these dashboards, giving them examples of what we were doing. And it went over great. They were super impressed. They immediately pulled out their laptops and started entering information. But the team lead told me later that morning, she goes, oh, that was phenomenal. She goes, we got about a third of our questions answered just by you going through this data dashboard with us. So we were really pleased with that. It set the tone for a great week. I think it showed them that we were a program that was actually using data. They were blown away that we were using the systems management wheel and all of those things. The last thing I want to say is it's easy to look at dashboards and think, oh, great, let's get a dashboard. But this takes a lot of process. What you saw in these videos and all that I just talked about doesn't just happen quickly. And it's more than just some of the things I talked about giving staff some questions to go into. About a year and a half ago, you really have to look at your program. I did a major reorg about a year and a half ago. And that was done specifically because I realized that we didn't have the right people on the bus. And my older crew would never have been able to adopt this data and use this. So the point I'm making is a lot of programs I talk to out there, I firmly believe that we as Head Start, we're here to run a business. Yeah, we run a social service program and people can get warm and fuzzy and all that, but we're getting paid millions of dollars to provide a service. So I have really tried to change the culture in that and not lose sight of what we're doing, but to show people we have an accountability to provide quality services. And so the point I'm making is if you don't have the right people on the bus and you don't have a team that is conducive and working together and that respects one another, these dashboards may be in your program, but they're not going to be of a lot of use. So I'm just trying to paint the picture, and Dave and I, is the way we work together. He's got the technicalities behind it and the dashboard. But again, I think a program is really going to have to look at a lot of internal things to make this work. And so the team I have now, there's a higher level of trust, respect, appreciation for interdependencies, and people are actually talking and working with each other without fear or jealousy or anger or whatever that may be. So that's just what I wanted to share. They can be fantastic for a program, but you do need to take into consideration, how is this going to work in my program, and are people going to accept this dashboard? Or if early on they begin to sabotage it and, you know, put the halts on it with people, then your data dashboard is going to be for naught.
So real quick before we move into the practicalities of what we've been working on, are there any questions up to this point? All right. So the practicalities, it really falls into 4 major areas that I see, and we're going to go through this really quickly. Now, for some of you that are more technologically advanced, this is going to be probably fairly rudimentary, but I think there's a lot of folks out there that are just starting to learn this side of the data analysis and the technical side. So we're going to walk through just a quick example of creating a simple attendance report from a data dump out of ChildPlus. Now again, if you have DAA access and you have the capacity to utilize direct administrator access straight into either a data warehouse or straight into Power BI. Power BI can actually reach into the back end. That's great. The more that you can do that, it's so much better. But most organizations don't have that capacity, don't have that skill set on staff. I will also say that even if you have direct DAA access, you still may want to consider a data warehouse, because then you can start normalizing the data across TSG, across your financial system, across other disparate systems within an organization. So just real quick, talking about the ETL process. The steps you want to take are identifying what data you want to pull from ChildPlus. We were talking a little bit about before, what exactly are the items that we want to report out on. Then what we've done is just build a live report to extract that specific data in a flat file format, whether it's text, text file, or CSV. You can pull it out in a JSON file if you're more adept at pulling that information in. But flat files seem to work. They're very, very simple. So you extract the data to a flat file in a dedicated folder. In this example, we're going to be doing it in for just a specific file, and then you transform that data if necessary. Change the dates or change any binaries so that you can pull that data in, and it keeps the integrity of that data as you pull it in. And then load that data into a data model or a data warehouse if you have it. So I'm going to pull. This is just an example of what you can do in ChildPlus. So we've written this live report for enrollment data, and I'm sorry, we're going to do attendance data. So in this attendance live report, we're just going to pull a beginning date. We're going to just do enrolled. We want to collect everybody in just for January. So we're going to export that data. Now, when we export this, we're not exporting it into anything, or the data that we're pulling out is anonymous. It's by child ID. So we're going to save this as attendance January. This shouldn't take that long. It's only 1 month. But for those organizations that are larger, what this is pulling down is essentially there's a data point for each individual child, for each individual classroom, for each individual day. So this, just for January, I think has 16,000 rows. Yeah, 16,000 rows of data. So this is just a flat file document, or a flat file Excel spreadsheet, CSV file. This really is the basis of all the data that you want to get. So many of the reports that you can generate in ChildPlus come in a formatted CSV or formatted. Those aren't what you want. You want the flat file documents like this. So we'll save that. And as you can see, it's pretty much that. There's no excitement, no flashy to this. It's just that flat file document. Those that are tech people understand this. So this is the file that you want to actually generate from ChildPlus. Oops. Any questions on extracting data from ChildPlus?
David, quick question. So if you have a real-time data, for example, if you use ChildPlus attendance apps, which allows you to capture a daily basis, so that if you want to see a daily data on your view, so they have to export every day instead of allowing you live connection to your visual. Yeah,
to update it, there has to be there has to be a dump down on a regular basis, or if you're wanting to look at it daily, you're going to have to do a daily dump. If you have the DAA access, that you don't need that. It pulls right in. That's really the only way that you're going to accomplish it, because somehow that data has to get into that data warehouse, whether it's a manual process or whether it's an automated process. The beauty of the DAA is that it's an automated process and it just automatically sucks in.
Yeah, I agree. That is what we have as a direct access. Yep. You can get data in real time. Yep. But like you said, if you have a warehouse, I believe this approach may work. Thanks so much, Dave.
Yeah. All right. So then taking that, let's go back. Oops. So after you've defined that, you've pulled that data down. That's where you start talking about, is it a data file or do we want to use it as a data warehouse? The data file is really just a small file for specific projects. It's best for small projects, ad hoc analysis on finite data sets. For example, this is just attendance data from 1 month. You can do a quick analysis on with Power BI. There's no real detailed measures. Again, a data warehouse it's so much more useful in larger projects, larger with what I call infinite data, meaning that it's continuous. You're going to continuously, month after month after month, add more information to it. You also want to have a data warehouse if you're reporting across disparate systems. Again, we just chatted about that a little bit. If you want to start normalizing TSG data or child progress data against class data, that's in your system. Or some organizations may house their class data outside of ChildPlus, pulling that in. And then if your measures or information is multidimensional, if you want to create a lot more dynamic connections between the data between the tables within ChildPlus. So today we're just going to work with that data file. So it's just a very small example of pulling that data out. Now, if it was, if you had a data warehouse, you would then pull that data out and use SQL or whatever you're using to pull that data into your data warehouse from that dedicated folder where it's sitting. So the next thing is, after you've pulled that data, you've got either the file or you've got the data in the data warehouse. The next piece is to create a connection within your visual software to the Power, to where that connection is sitting. So I'm going to pull up Power BI real quick. And it was open and now it's not. Just real quick, how many people are familiar with Power BI versus Tableau? Does everybody at least have an idea of what Power BI is?
Yeah, we use Power BI extensively.
Yeah. Does anybody know? Does anybody not know what Power BI is? Good. Again, Tableau versus Power BI, I think both are great softwares. I just have more of an affinity for how the visuals are created or how they display within Microsoft. It also works seamlessly if you're using SharePoint and other Office products. So I've always been drawn to the Microsoft BI project, Power BI platform. So this is the actual Power BI desktop. So what I'm going to do is this is a new file. I'm going to create a connection with that specific file that I just created or dropped down. So I'm going to connect. I'm going to get data, and it's a text CSV file. I'm going to go into that folder where I saved it, and I'm going to open it up. So what this is going to do is it's going to create the connections with that, and it's going to pull the data in. Now I can start doing some editing of this data right now, or I can just simply load it and then go back and look at the data and make changes once it's loaded into my data model. So now that it's loaded, you'll see here's the table, and these are all the fields within the table. And then we can actually look at the data itself by clicking over on the data tab. And what I want to do is let's change this data to just a simple date. The reason I want to do that is otherwise when I try to pull a report or create a visualization, it's going to give me the full data name or field name. So I'm just going to abbreviate that. The other thing I want to do is we have site names, we have class names. I want to create a column that combines the two so that I can look at specific classrooms. There are, let's say, if we were to look at Buckeye, you can see that there are two different types of classrooms at Buckeye. So there's an AM and there's a PM. So what I want to do is be able to look at each specifically. So I'm going to create a, I'm going to create a new column that combines the two. So it's going to be site class. So this is just going to be site name. And now this is actually DAX coding, which is similar. It's DAX is DAX. It is data analysis expression. It's very similar to Excel, and people who know Excel get the logic behind it. The coding actually, the actual wording is a little bit different, but anybody who knows Excel can pick this up really quickly. So let's do class name, classroom name. So what that's going to do is just create a column with a combination of the site and the classroom. So now I can go over, this is my blank canvas. So let's just do a text box. Let's call this Westside Head Start attendance. And I'm going to make that 42. Let's put some shade on it. Background on blue. And then let's enter, let's include a logo. So you just go and find your logo, throw it up there. So now you've got the makings of an attendance dashboard. Now, let's start pulling in some of the data. So you're going to go over and pull in a matrix. So this allows you to actually drill down into information as well as look at it in a summary form. So I'm going to pull over here. The rows I want to show are the site class that I created. So now I'll be able to look at each of the classrooms. Now, what I've pulled over in this data is just an attendance code, and it is, like I was saying before, it's an individual, for each individual child, for each individual day, for each individual class, there is a P or there's an attendance code that's associated with that. So we want to be able to look at that in an aggregate. So I'm going to create a measure. And let's call that attendance total. So that is going to be, I'm going to just simply count the rows, count rows of the table in attendance. So it's the attendance table, and then I'm going to capture the attendance code that are not blank. If they're blank, then ChildPlus reads it as it's a data that's closed, or it's not collected. So it's blank. So we're just going to capture the ones that have data in it. So that gives us the total. So what we could do is look at that number real quick, but just adding a card visual and pulling in the total. So that's going to give us the total number. Remember, there were 16,000 rows. So that's telling us there's 16,000 rows. So we can also create a measure that says this is attendance present. So this is going to be the attendance codes that show present. So it's still the same thing. We're going to do count rows of the table attendance. This is it's not a lot of coding. For some folks, it may be overwhelming, but again, if you have somebody on staff that understands Excel, they can get this real quick. So attendance, so we're going to look at that table, and we're going to filter it, and filter it by attendance code equal to present. Now you're going to have to actually create some more filters, because this is only going to collect those that are present. So the actual attendance, the 88% is going to be lower, because I'm not capturing tardy, not capturing late or left early. So this is just an example of being able to create a measure that you can then use to create other measures. So then I'll do my final measure, which is just going to be ADA, and that's going to be my attendance present divided by my attendance total. So now I can start pulling these measures over into the actual visual. So if I do attendance total in my values, it's going to show up over here. So At Avondale South, there were 158 student days. Then I can do, of those 158, 118 were marked as present. Then if I also pull over my ADA percentage, and I'm gonna make sure that that is set as a percentage. I can pull that over, and it'll tell me the percentage of each one of those classrooms, and I can then sort that and rank them. I can then also create conditional formatting for each one of those rows. So if I were to create conditional formatting based on, let's just do color scale where lowest value, let's do diverging, so there's a yellow. So it's going to give me the lowest number up to the highest number. So you're creating key visualizations that people can really look at and get an idea of really quick. So very easily, as you look at this report with your staff, very quickly you can identify which ones are lagging behind in attendance. And if you use this document on a regular basis, daily, weekly, monthly, you can really start getting staff, as Lloyd was talking before, engaged in looking at what this information is. Then we can also just add a simple ranking graph. So let's just pull in a graph, and we'll do site class as my axis, and then we'll do 88 percentage as my value. So it's going to give me a ranked order of my classrooms with the highest. Same thing this is telling us, but it's presented in a different visualization. Then I can also pull in a visualization on, whoops. Hello?
Dave, I think as the owner, you should be able to mute that person from the phone numbers.
Yeah.
7601.
There we go. So then we can also add the top reasons for absences. So we can look at the reason code on the axis, and then we'll look at the total number is our value. And then because there's so many blanks in there, what we'll want to do is we'll just want to select out those blanks. So this is going to tell us the top reason codes for each one, in summary of all the organization, as well as individual, and we'll look at that in a second. And let's make this a percentage of total. So instead of looking at the individual count, we can look at it as a percentage of the grand total. So it'll tell us what the top reasons for absence codes or for absences were. So let's sort this too by that. So it'll show that sick is the top reason, transportation is the second. We can then, because we've created this and everything is dynamically linked in that same data model, I can then pick IMS and it'll change all this data and it'll say specifically what the sick percentage is for that specific class and how they compare to the average. And then the last data item I might add is, let's do, to this matrix, let's add the ChildPlus ID to the rows, and then let's also add the attendance date to the rows. Now what that allows us to do is drill into this specific matrix and look at, for IMS, these are the actual kiddos and their specific attendance rates, and then it allows me to look at the individual children and drill in and see which dates they were there and which dates they were gone. So there's a lot of interactivity generated by just this simple data pull from ChildPlus. So in the last 10 minutes, we were able to create a very dynamic, interactive attendance dashboard from a simple data export from ChildPlus. If there's any other geeks out there, to me, I love this. I love being able to take data where it's not sexy, and be able to put it into a visualization where people can actually see very quickly. They can make decisions, or they can understand what the data is specifically trying to tell them. So this is a quick dashboard. The last piece that we wanted to talk about was distributing the visuals. Now, you can either, and I know we're bumping up on time, and I want to be able to give people the opportunity to ask questions. So I'm going to run through this fairly quickly. So you can actually take that PBIX file, which is this. I can save this out, and I can save it out as a file. It's like an Excel file, but it has all the data in it. I can save that, and then I can send that out to whoever wants to see it. They'll have to have Power BI Desktop to open it up and read it. The challenge with that is it's very similar to an Excel spreadsheet. Who has the latest version? That's why I like to use a portal to publish this information. Gets everybody together, gets everybody on the same sheet. There's on the same page. It allows the communications, as you saw with the comments. But that's what we've tried to do. That's what we've done at Catholic Charities. So the next thing we want to do is generate the code to embed the Power BI report into that web portal page. So we use SharePoint. I use SharePoint. It's again another Microsoft product. I don't get paid by Microsoft, so don't. I just am a big believer in SharePoint. I'm a big believer in Microsoft's products. At the same time, they're often very good at offering nonprofit discounts if your grantee status is a nonprofit organization. And then reports can be exported also as both PDF and PowerPoint files for static distribution, and I'll show you that real quick. So once I've developed that Power BI Desktop, that file, I then publish it out to my Power BI service. And the Power BI service, if you sign up for Power BI Pro license, which is $10 a month, I think it's less, I think it's $6 for nonprofits, $6 a month, you'll get a Power BI service. It's essentially a cloud-based publishing platform. So I'll publish it out to my workspace. So that's what it's doing, is going out there and publishing that to the cloud in my specific instance. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up in Power BI Service. And there's a report that I just published. So if I open that up, you'll see it's the same exact report. All of the interaction is all the same. What I can do is I can actually export this to a PDF, or I can export it to a PowerPoint. So those are the actual printed documents that you can then distribute. This is Larry distributes the PowerPoint presentation to his policy council. So he collects that document as well. The neat thing about when you publish these out to a PowerPoint or PDF is it creates a direct link on the cover sheet, and folks can actually go in and interact with the data themselves. So what I'm going to do is publish to the web. I'm going to create embed code, and it's going to give me a code that I can then enter into my SharePoint site. So I'm going to copy that code, Then I'm going to go over to my SharePoint portal, and then let's just add a new page. We'll do example. We'll just make that plain. Then we'll actually create an sorry. What I want to add is an embedded code. So then I'll paste my embedded code into my portal page, make an adjustment to the size, publish, and now my dashboard report is published out to my portal, so that any of the staff that have access to this portal are now able to come in and look at this. That's one of the reasons I like using SharePoint, is I can limit the access to who can see each one of these individual dashboards. I can limit those who have access to director's report, to the class report. So you're able to create a little bit more security of who can see this internally. And again, you can't share this outside of the organization. Whoever wants to look at this has to come in through this portal. So there was a question earlier about how do you distribute this? How can people look at this without having a Power BI license? So the other way that you can actually publish this report is if you were to publish what's called, let's delete this, and you can actually publish a Power BI report. So this will actually create the Power BI connection, and then you go and you find that report and add it in there. This, you have to have a license to actually view the report. You'll have to go through and sign into the Power BI when you click on this item. Honestly, don't know why Microsoft allows both. I think it might be because there's some organizations that don't publish this on SharePoint. They might publish it to an outside portal or to an outside page, at which point Microsoft wants to capture those folks coming in to see it, wanting to make sure that they have a Power BI license. Anybody behind this SharePoint site has a Microsoft license, has a free Power BI license to see and visualize the data. So I'm not sure why Microsoft allows both, but for organizations where cost is an issue, whenever we can do stuff on the cheap, I think we should do that. And to me, it's the ex-CFO in me. I want to make sure that folks are allowed to do that, or that we democratize this data as much as possible.
So, hey, Dave.
Yep.
I just want to clarify. So when you use the embed for the web page, you can embed that in a web page too, and put that online. Anybody that can access that web page, they'd be able to see the report, if I understand correctly from what I understand from Microsoft. But they wouldn't be able, then they wouldn't have to have a license.
Right.
See that. That's how some organizations are able to allow you to see basic reports. One of our procurement softwares, they allow us to look at some Power BI, but we can't manipulate anything.
Right.
The other part is, right, you'd have to have an enterprise license, which I understand the E3 license is about $4,000 a month.
Yeah, that's just basic. That's just
basic. Yeah. But that lets you have so many people at so many views. So when you do so I use the SharePoint, like go to SharePoint and then Power BI.
Yeah.
So if you use this embed into, does that allow the person to see it without having a license, or do you still have to have the service license to see it with the web embed? Is that right?
Yeah. So when you assign a person to the entity or the organization, right?
Yeah.
When you assign their licenses, they have different level of licenses. You assign them a free Power BI license.
Right. Okay.
Instead of a Power BI Pro license.
Because the license right now is like what? It's like 30 nonprofits, like $8 or $9 a year or something. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But so what we've had to do is, if we've embedded it and then the users that have used it outside of those who have the service,
yeah,
they on SharePoint we gave them licenses, and so they can see it, but we've limited what report somebody can see.
Right.
So that's okay. So that's here. I just was curious if by embedding it in the web versus going through the Power BI service portal,
right,
to see it without having a license. But either way, you have to have a service license to see either one of these reports?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That's a great question. And that was one of the challenges that I had in looking at this, because, you know, most organizations, even, again, I'm focusing on smaller organizations. They don't have, when you talk about, you know, $9 a year for 20 people, you know, even that sends chills through their spine about what that's going to cost. Now, let's just leave that alone. But it's so important that as many people are allowed to interact with this data as possible, because that's where you get the real traction. That's where you get the real change and the real movement, as Larry was talking about. And you're able to create that comments, that you're able to create that dialogue between folks, and create that log of interaction with the data as well. So that is, I know that's been sort of fast and furious. To me, just I want to say that we, you know, as I've, you know, walked through and talked with folks, and I think Larry can talk to this as well. But, you know, we don't portray this data as the, you know, it's not gotcha. This isn't meant to be a way that we can keep our thumb on staff. We really owe it to the children and families that we're serving in our communities to use all the data that we have at our hands to increase and improve the impact that we have on their lives. I think that's what we're hearing from OHS. I think that's what we're hearing, and I think that's what most data wonks really believe. It's communicating that effectively with staff, so they don't feel threatened by data, and they don't feel as though this is a big brother looking and watching what they're doing. We want to engage them because folks, those are the ones that are going to make the change in these children's lives. So, any questions? I am bumping right up against the time, so I'm open to. I'll answer any questions or any thoughts or comments that anybody has.
And I will also say to anyone who has to make sure that they, you know, jump off in time and can't stay for questions, that our project management call on Tuesday, we're gonna make sure that there's some time reserved to really, you know, give Dave some feedback about, you know, what was great about this, what would you like to see, and then also kind of think more generally about how we bring trainings and this knowledge out to other people in the field instead of just kind of within this group. So we'll discuss that on Tuesday, but for now, questions for Dave.
Everybody's numb.
Or possibly still on mute.
All right. Feel free to either contact either Larry or myself if you have any questions or just want to get some ideas on what you can do or you know, if you have technical questions about how you can pull the data, or some of the information of how Larry, you know, used the data in his Focus 2 area review, Focus Area 2 review. I think he has a lot of information. I was able to sit with him, and it's kind of scary at first, but I think you know, it went over well. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for participating. Thanks for jumping on. And again, feel free to contact me or Larry or Victoria on any feedback that you have, any information. I would love to hear it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.